Hey everyone, it's Carter King. If you're an educator, a leader, or just a parent who wants to teach kids about space, check out my newest book, Carter's Journey Through Space. It's available now on Amazon, Target, and bookstores everywhere. Come explore the universe with me.
Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create environments where people thrive. Through real conversations, practical strategies, and powerful stories, we equip leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself to build cultures rooted in purpose, performance, and authenticity. Because culture isn't something you talk about, it's something you live. This is the Contagious Culture Podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create ecosystems and environments where people thrive. Man, I am so excited today to talk to our guest for today. He is absolutely exceptional. And we've been trying to get this episode on the books for a long time.
Yeah.
His energy, his vision, how he shows up for his community is absolutely exceptional. And his story on how and why he's gotten to where he is leading today is, oh man, our listeners are in for an absolute treat. Frank, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Kyle, and you're right. I'm glad we finally were able to make this happen.
We made it happen finally. Now, I know you're in Arizona. I know your organization, but for our listeners, what is your favorite walkout song? You're getting ready to give a keynote
Oh,
to 10,000
it's an easy.
people. Like, what's the walkout song you're coming out to?
It's My Hood by Young Jeezy. So my
Let's go.
business name is For the Hood, and that was literally the inspiration for creating the name of my organization was My
Really?
Hood by Young Jeezy. Yeah, it
Oh, tell
just
me more.
doing
You got to tell me more.
well. Yeah, well, the main lyrics, it's like I'm doing it for my hood, I'm doing it for your hood, I'm doing it for
Mhm.
their hood, I'm doing it for our hood. So
Yep.
that's kind of the work that I do. I really look at it. I'm a brown man,
Yep.
Latino man, and the work I love working with communities of color. So black folks, brown folks, Asian folks, any marginalized group, really just around building equity, whether it's gender, racial, etc. Just we all deserve the same level of playing field. So
Yeah.
that's what really leads my work.
Now, a lot of times we can read people's bios and resumes and LinkedIn posts and all of these different things, but in a nutshell, what is the work that you do and what does it look like practically on the ground? Hey, it's Kyle. Sorry to interrupt your programming, but I got a quick culture check for you. How's your team's energy right now? I mean, literally, right now. Are people feeling inspired? Or are they just showing up? See, here's the truth. Culture doesn't change because we talk about it. It changes because we live it actively every single day. And that's what I help organizations do: build contagious cultures that people actually want to be a part of. Through keynote talks, interactive trainings, and hands-on consulting, I help leaders transform the way their teams connect, perform, and grow. So if your culture needs a little bit of spark, let's light it up together. Visit theculturelab.org, again, theculturelab.org, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn at Kyle S. King to learn more about how we can work together. Because remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching. Now let's get back.
Yeah. So, if I could describe what I do in one word, it's storytelling. Whether it's an individual, helping an individual, which is what I really, really love doing, is helping individuals reclaim their stories and tell them authentically on their own terms. But I also work with organizations, so if an organization is having trouble telling their story, I love working with that as well. And that could be through grant writing, but a lot of it is just simply through I ask a few pointed questions and I try to glean out the best information to really describe that organization and tell their story. What are their values? So, yeah, I would say that's the through line. It's storytelling.
Why is storytelling, you think, so challenging? Because we often say we know the importance of story. We know how impactful it is, especially in today's digital world. Why is it so challenging telling stories, though?
Well, I think from a few lenses. I think the one I will lead with, I think it's difficult for communities of color to tell their stories because our stories have often been told for us
That's good.
without our consent. So that is probably the single most challenging in regards to individual storytelling, especially for our communities.
Yeah.
And then in regards to other forms of storytelling, I think sometimes, and this does happen, and I hate to say it, but in a political sense, sometimes stories are geared, or as I mentioned earlier, told for us, and then we only see that one lens. You can look through the history of storytelling, especially like, social studies. What
Yeah.
did we learn when we were kids? And then we come up to grow older and we're like, oh, well, that's
That's
not what
good.
happened.
That's not what happened.
Exactly. So I think it's challenging for those who have been historically marginalized to reclaim our stories. But I feel like if we coalesce, if we come together, and there's truth and power, and certainly in togetherness, to collectively reclaim those stories and tell them the accurate stories of those.
Now, tell me more about what you mean and how you would define the power of reclaiming our story. Why is that so important?
Well, I could go through a lot of different ways of explaining that, Kyle, but I don't want to assume that I know any other person's journey, but I know mine. And so I have moved through leadership. I want to say pretty much since 2010, I started getting, getting promotions and whatnot. And I never fully felt, and I couldn't name it until, I don't know, maybe 2020, where I couldn't name where I was feeling these feelings of inauthenticity. I was trying to fit into a box. I was trying to do exactly what I thought what was expected, but I always felt like this like a reverse magnet, where I was feeling like not connected to that work, or certainly those stories. And so I think for me was really trying to maneuver through that space and finding my power in my own voice. And again, it hasn't been like a light switch. I had to move through spaces. I had to move through some really tough times. I used to work for a nonprofit. It didn't end on the best of terms, which is fine. But at the same time, that was also my reflection point of like, oh, wow, I wasn't my authentic self ever in those 3 years that I was there. And so finding spaces, finding areas, finding people, and finding organizations that would at least let me step into my power a little bit more than I did before was truly, truly helpful. Like in between leading that nonprofit and then doing For the Hood, I worked at an organization, and it was a very white organization. And certainly there were some challenges there, but what I loved was the CEO there, a very good friend of mine. He's the one that hired me. When I left that organization, he said one of the kindest things, just said that I had taught him so much of kind of like my space, how I move as a brown man in this world, that he had never known. And we both grew up in Tucson, we're both from the same place. And just hearing that helped me at least reflect in that way, how he helped me rebuild my voice, even in that structure, and then fully being able to do it with For the Hood.
There's so much power in what you just described, and I see it from the other lens, from a leadership perspective. What can we do? What can I do as a leader to create spaces, though, where we acknowledge and invite and empower those powerful stories, and for our teams and colleagues to show up with that authenticity that's so necessary?
Well, I think as a person of color, and you as well,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's easier to create the space, but the fact that we have gone through that experience of lived experience of kind of like the challenges we've gone through, I think it is a little bit easier. I think it can be a little bit more challenging for a white leader who's had that privilege to create the space. Because I know, like I just mentioned, this boss that I just had, not that he was intentionally trying to create the space, but I just think the mere understanding of trying and helping, he did as best as he could in that space. But to answer your question directly, I use a model. I have a program called Ascending Leaders in Color. But what I do in that model is that it's called a restorative circle practice. And so using restorative circles, we do some intentional emotion check-ins that help center the group, But certainly at the outset, we co-create group agreements. And those group agreements are things that we always look to every time that we meet. So it immediately centers us, and we reflect and we say, all right, are we still good with these agreements? And the agreements could be stuff like speak your truth, or speak from the heart, listen from the heart, confidentiality rules, any of the, be respectful, be open-minded. When we create those together, there's a mutual accountability. And so when we get to the hard parts of like tough conversations in any type of leadership space, that is super helpful, because then we can quickly look at the group agreements and say, oh, yeah, let me say it this way, so that we all are hearing from our hearts, listening from our hearts, but also speaking from our hearts, but always doing it in a respectful way. So I find that most powerful or most helpful in these leadership spaces, to create the conditions to have these hard conversations.
The creating the conditions. I remember in my years of teaching, as well as leading in the educational system, how it's so important for us as leaders in this school system to create conditions for our students to be able to want to learn and want to show up and want to be engaged in the conversation that's happening in class. And I didn't realize until I stepped out of the classroom that it's the same thing when we look at teens
Right?
and adults, like you, and even at home with our families, like creating these conditions. What are steps though that you've seen in your career that have worked for organizations or environments that aren't necessarily conditioned in the way that they should be, but to shift those conditions in the way where it's more inviting and a more inclusive environment, I would say?
Yeah, I think, and thank you for asking that question, because I am looking at it through the lens, as you just said, like maybe it's whether they don't know all the steps, or they don't quite know the knowledge of how to do it. But what's absolutely needed is the readiness to say, I want to try. If they're not at that point of wanting to try, it's not going to be successful. So you really want to get those organizations, or the leadership in those organizations, into a space of like, I really want to do this. And so once you get that readiness component, then for me, you have to have some front loaded work with the leadership, because you really want to, again, create the conditions. And what that means is it's almost like stripping away hierarchy, titles and whatnot, but it is challenging. So where I have found most success is in mixed groups, meaning like people from different organizations. I've done work with singular organizations, but I've also really tried to create the conditions that there's not, like, let's say there's a supervisor and an employee in the same group, because that employee is not going to feel like they can be fully forthcoming. So I tend to try to put those into different groups, those folks that there's no of those leadership, so that people can feel freely to say what they want to say. And then also ensuring what I said earlier, confidentiality. It's like whatever is said in there cannot be used outside of the space. If that's breached, then the whole project, the whole program just goes to waste. So it's very intentional about those pieces.
No, that's so good. And I'm interested, and you mentioned it earlier that you have this program that you use to be able to empower individuals within potentially even this process. I'd love to know, I'm a leader, I'm an organization, I'm a funder, and I see your organization. How do I engage with you, and what would be the outcomes or the impact after I engage with you?
I think engaging with me is pretty simple. Like it's on my website, 4dahood.com, but it again, the through line is storytelling. You'll see kind of like the offerings I do, but all of them, if not all of them, I'm thinking it probably is all of them, outside like a one-on-one, maybe training or a workshop, or a coaching session. They're all wrapped around that restorative circle process. So everything is done with intention. Those are all spelled out at the beginning, and it really, truly, I would say, creates the conditions. Here's how I typically say it, Colin. I'm still trying to think of still trying to wordsmith it, but it's like, it's the thing. What I offer is the thing you do before you do the things you do, and that really is. It's creating the conditions for success. So we tend, I think, just naturally as humans, we want to get right to the problem, and then we dive right into it. So what I provide is, well, before you dive into it, we have to start here. Here's where then everything comes out. So any type of conflict that comes up, you've already gone through the process of doing the thing that you need to
Yeah,
do before we do the things that we do.
that's
So
cool.
what you'll find, my site is really, any type of process is really creating those conditions so that we can have these hard conversations for any project, any sector. Does not have to be just in the nonprofit sector. The spaces are everywhere where we're trying to communicate, collaborate, and really do great work.
Why is it so challenging to have hard conversations? I find that in my man, I recognize as I get older, and I'm still young, but as I get older, um, that better people lead better teams and create better environments and produce, better success within their organizations. And for years, I did not like having tough conversations until a mentor of mine sat me down and he said, "Your success will be judged based upon the amount of tough conversations that you will be able to have within your career." And I really
Mhm.
sat with that, went to therapy, started really unpacking some things. And I'm like, wow, became a different person, better person on a personal side. And then it showed up, and I
Mhm.
invite those types of conversations in the workplace. And I look at them as not criticism or complaining, but as feedback. But just in your experience and your leadership, why is it still so challenging for
Well,
people in these environments?
the short answer is, it's we've been conditioned. That is how it's looked, and I'm not here to. I want to lovingly call in. Let me put it that way. So historically, workplaces, the design, how we move through those spaces has been created by white male cisgender men,
Yeah,
and so we've operated in that space,
that's good.
and it is quite often said that white men do not like that type of conflict, and so they, it's like you walk the line, and so anybody moving through that system is going to then struggle having these hard conversations. You talked about your career. I feel the same way. Like, I didn't say anything earlier in my career, and as I've gotten older, wiser, having my own business, I know how to create those conditions. But that's why it's been hard, is because we've been conditioned for so,
Mm,
and it's still happening. And again, not to get political, but the current state we're in is it's perpetuating all of those things all over again. And so now it's like, it feels like we have to start over. But
yeah,
honestly, for folks like you and I, it's like, no, this is where we're needed most. And this
yeah.
is where we can collab and work with each other to ensure that those conversations, no matter how difficult, if we create the right conditions for it, can be successful.
That's so good. Frank, you interface and collaborate and connect with a lot of individuals, and I'm sure you get invited on stages and various in the various work that you do. And oftentimes where we find ourselves talking about not the same thing, but similar topics that allow us to stay on brand. And we don't really get the chance to talk about the things that are simply just getting us excited about the work that we're doing, or things that we've seen, or companies that we've been able to, research, et cetera, et cetera. What's getting you excited these days? Hey, it's Kyle. Sorry to interrupt your programming, but I got a quick culture check for you. How's your team's energy right now? I mean, literally, right now. Are people feeling inspired? Or are they just showing up? See, here's the truth: culture doesn't change because we talk about it, it changes because we live it actively every single day. And that's what I help organizations do: build contagious cultures that people actually want to be a part of. Through keynote talks, interactive trainings, and hands on consulting, I help leaders transform the way their teams connect, perform, and grow. So if your culture needs a little bit of spark, let's light it up together. Visit theculturelab.org, again, theculturelab.org, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn at Kyle S. King to learn more about how we can work together. Because remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching. Now let's get back to the program.
Such a great question, Colin. It's funny because we didn't, I know we didn't talk, but honestly, I am so glad you asked that, because every year since I've had my business, well, starting in, well, I start my business, I opened it in November of 22, but since
Mhm.
23, I would do like a word of the year. So the
Okay.
first in 23, it was intent because I wanted to grow my business. So I got to be
Mhm.
intentional about this. Year two, which was 2024, the word was action. I was like, all right, here's the intent, but what actions am I doing to grow it?
Yep.
Last year in 25, the word was relationships. This is when I knew I was going to be branching out into my business. And I was like, okay, Frank, you know, you're going to have some ups and downs, you know,
Mhm.
in 2025. So make sure your relationships remain strong
Yep.
and continue to expand. But you mentioned about what gets me excited. So what I noticed before 2026, and it was starting to come through 26, is that because the work, you know, that you and I do, Kyle, is hard, you
Yeah.
know, and we tend to, I don't want to say get serious, but we tend to kind of go into those spaces.
Mhm.
Well, my word for 2026 was joy. And the way I can frame it, Kyle, is, you know, I often talk about black joy. I talk about brown joy, you know, the hurt and the things that we've gone through in our communities. Yet here we are smiling. You know, you have your quinceañera, you have your
Yep.
backyard barbecue. We laugh wholeheartedly with our whole bodies. And that is something as a good reminder is no matter how hard the work gets, to tap into that joy. And to me, that is hand in hand with relationships. So what gets me excited is anytime I meet somebody new, anytime I get to talk to somebody new, we get to have these really rich conversations. And more often than not, they end up becoming like a really good friend. And even if we don't have
Sure.
anything, I don't know, and mind you, the goal is not to um, create a new friendship as a means to an end.
Yeah.
But what happens is if I learn everything about you, let's say something comes across my face and I'm like, oh, I think Kyle would be great for that. Then I
Exactly.
can reach out and say, hey, Kyle, this thing came up and I thought of you. And so that really is what excites me is when I get to build these really strong relationships. I have a small inner circle, and I want to say two people just fully emerged late last year for me, and it was such a blessing to see these two people now in my inner
Yeah.
circle, and I will call them by name, Beth and Hannah. You know,
Ah,
thank you to both of you because you truly have helped me move through some tough spaces, into 25 and certainly into 26 as well.
I really appreciate you even shouting them out and just acknowledging them, and it shows so much about your heart as well. But I even love this word joy, because I find myself, I keep telling people when I'm on the phone that I really believe that I'm living an answered prayer in my life because
I
it
love
just
that.
feels like I'm in flow where I'm connecting with the right people and, doing work that I absolutely love. And I'm actually taking time to play tennis once a week, even though I'm terrible. Like I'm just doing it for not the result, but just doing it because I
Yeah.
enjoy doing it. And someone shared with me yesterday, and it was so powerful. And I was like, I appreciate you for your heart. And she messaged me back and she said something. She said, Kyle, I'm you. I'm just mirroring who you are to everyone in your life. And I really appreciate that because it challenged me to really think about the seasons when I didn't necessarily have the right aligned people. It
Yeah,
required me to look back in my life and what am I putting out there? What are the seeds that I'm planting and how am I showing
absolutely.
up? And Frank, it went back to what you were saying earlier in regards to that authenticity. And when I reclaimed my own story and when I became more authentic and when I became aligned with where I believe God was calling me to be, everything started just flowing.
Yeah.
Frank, with people that are listening to this podcast, people that are trying to reclaim their story, they're trying, even as an organizational leader, to communicate their story of impact more intentionally, more effectively. Where do they even begin? And what is the step-by-step process you would recommend them going through so that they can experience various things that we've experienced?
Yeah, well, one, I think where they begin is let's have a conversation. You know, I would love to talk to anybody on this podcast who's listening. Let's do like an exploratory calling, just kind of figure that out. In regards to what you said in regards to step by step, I just finished a project. It was a phase two project with an organization called the Arizona Food Bank Network.
Okay.
They're based in Phoenix. I'm in Tucson. It's a statewide program. But the goal was to create a council of people with the lived experience of food insecurity and build their advocacy skills through their storytelling, and to do it without harm. So I created a framework, which now I'm using outside of that project. It's called Your Story, Your Terms. And it's really just simply breaking down kind of how to tell your story. I won't tell you all the steps because they're not immediately in my head, but I will tell you the last one is called Keep What's Yours. That was probably the most important. That is probably the most important part of the process, because our stories aren't necessarily meant for full consumption. Meaning, like, if I'm asking somebody to tell their story and they're still close to their story, or there's pieces of their story that are really painful, I'm not there to say, no, tell that story. That's really effective. People are going to cry. That is such a bad way of looking at things. And historically, that it has been the case. It's like, you want to evoke emotion. Well, you can evoke emotion without creating harm. And so that part ended up being, I would say, one of the most important parts of the process of keeping what's theirs. Tell the story that you want to tell. Tell it what you believe, what you want, what's the ask, what is the change. But ensuring that you do not reopen your wounds means keeping what's yours. And so, would love to have somebody connect with me on the call. And then I will go through that framework with folks and help them reclaim their stories in a way that matters to them.
What's next, Frank? Like, this gets me so excited. And it's interesting because we so much highlight the work that's happening now, or even the story that got us here. What's next? Like, what are you guys cooking up over there?
Well, one, I've written a book. So it's about to come out. So I just signed my contract with the publisher, and that is really pointing again towards, in fact, the title is called Reclaim, Reconnect, Rise Up. And what that simply means is we reclaim our stories, as we've just talked on this call. Reconnect means bringing white folks and people of color together to reconnect after they've gone through the process of reclaiming their stories, and then rising up. All right, what are we going to do collectively to help with these really serious issues that are happening in our communities? And so I'm really excited about that's coming up. And I have desires of kind of what you're doing yourself with this conference. I have an idea for a summit that I'd like to do, but that might be a 2027 thought. But those are the cool things that are coming up next. I'm doing a few presentations. I have a keynote that I'm doing in a couple of weeks in Arizona for the AFP statewide conference, AFP Association of Fundraising Professionals. So those are the cool things that are coming up. And really, I'm hoping to secure a phase 3 for this project that I said with the Arizona Food Bank. And then maybe do some other things. Some bank has reached out recently to do some work with them. So any type of small contracts that I can do to help people reclaim their stories is really what gets me most excited. So that's what's on the turnpike for sure.
No, I love that. And look, just Contagious Culture Conference. I love the shout out there. I'm super excited as we're pulling together the content, the itinerary. I'm so excited for what the audience will be able to experience from you. I have to get out to Arizona before the conference just
Please
so that
do.
we can sit down. It's interesting because when you start connecting with people online or on LinkedIn or wherever, you start recognizing, which I love and I hate, that no one lives in Charlotte. It's just like, oh my God, like it requires me to get on a plane to go see everyone. But what I'm starting to see is that I'm connecting with more and more people that are in the same pocket of place.
Yes.
So it's like, all right, when I come to Arizona, I'll be able to connect with 3 or 4 people. And then when I go to LA or SoCal, I'll be able to connect with this group of individuals in this community that I've been able to create over these last years. So I will definitely pop a flight. Where can people find you guys online, and how can people continue to support your work?
Oh yeah, so online is the number 4 DAHOOD.com, for the hood .com is how they can find me online. There's so many. What I really want is I want people to understand why my program, the Ascending Leaders in Color program, is needed, because that really is about digging into these hard conversations. I do them in affinity groups. So I have a white group, I have a person of color group, and the topics range from microaggressions, code switching, the bias of professionalism, the adverse effects of assimilation, tokenism, colorism, the glass cliff, intersectionality, because these are things that largely are uniquely happen to people of color. And so being able to be in a space, and it's only 10 people per group, to keep it intimate, we can really kind of dig deep into these conversations. And then having the affinity group helps them see it in a place that minimizes and mitigates harm. I don't want to intermix, because sometimes there might be something that is unintentionally harmful. And so I want to make sure that each group is psychologically in a safe space. And then we can come together and then, as I said, tackle this through together. All right, you've gone through this experience together. What can be next? So honestly, I would love to restart that program. I've had 8 cohorts complete. I would say the current administration is impacted. You do pay to be a part of this. Yeah. But I am determined, trying to find, whether it's sponsors or whatnot, to restart this program, because it has been a year since the last cohort ended. And I've always had cohorts continuing from 23 to 25 and then 20. Yeah, it was hard, but I am determined to restart this program, because the people who've come out of it always talk highly of, like, it was not what I expected. It really becomes like this values aligned thing of, like, how to be authentic, how to lead with courage, how to be joyful, and do it unapologetically.
Frank, I might have a contact for you, but we'll talk offline for sure.
Please.
Look, if all of my Contagious Culture listeners, we appreciate you. And if you love this conversation as much as I love this conversation, go give Frank a follow. Go connect with this organization, fund him, write him a check, connect with him online, and continue to be committed to show up authentically and share and reclaim your story. It's another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. And we always remember, the energy you bring is the culture you create, people. So go create some amazing and contagious culture. We will see you guys next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Contagious Culture Podcast. If this episode challenged or inspired you, hey, take a second to share it with someone who's building culture in their world. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself join the movement. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Kyle S. King for more tips, tools, and methodologies to be able to help you create this ecosystem of absolute excellence. Until next time, lead boldly, live intentionally, and remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching.